Hello, my name is Rachel, and this is UltraHuman, where I'm here to help you be your best human. And today, I'm going to do that by talking in a kind of a general sense about depression. And it's just some things that I'm finding out recently and putting together. And so I'm going to try and compact this as much as I can. So first of all, you may have seen that I have some older videos that are about seasonal affective disorder and like seasonal depression, specifically the winter variety of depression. Now, we are actually entering right now the peak of summer affective disorder, summer depression. And this is actually considered to be like a more active, there are more suicides in April and May than any other time of year. And I think a lot of people don't know that, but kind of the hypothesis behind that is that when we are depressed in the wintertime, a lot of what that does to us is it kind of puts us into this state of inactivity. Whereas the version of depression that really comes out most in like the spring and summertime is something where we start to become aggressive, become agitated, and we're more likely to do something like take a drastic action, such as to have suicidal actions or thoughts. So if you are feeling down and you're wondering why, because the sun is coming out and all of those things, don't beat yourself up. Seek professional help. And that was one of the things I wanted to talk about today too, is that I know I mentioned in my last video, I was going to start counseling. I was supposed to start it 2 weeks ago, but we had some flooding here in the area. If you didn't see the whole world is flooding. This wasn't that bad, but it was in some places. For a lot of individuals in this area, they had some pretty serious damage to their properties, but for the most part, it just shut down a lot of businesses and things like that. And so, this week, when I went to my counseling session, I had what I had kind of thought confirmed, which is that I technically would still be considered to have depression and anxiety, sort of like a leftover from my postpartum experience, and really just going too long without having that addressed and like coming up with better coping skills and life skills after transitioning into being a parent, I think would be a lot of the reasons I could put to that. And so in dealing with that, I myself am seeking professional help. And so I wanted to also let people know the way that I'm going about doing this is that there is a Christian university here in Eugene. And so they offer professional counseling services from grad students. And as such, if you're a student, as I am currently, then it is free. If you are not a student, a current student, then it is very affordable. I think that their services run something like $10 per meeting, which can go anywhere from like an hour to 2 hours. And that's just insane. Like, obviously, well, these are grad students. And so I think most of the time they're not paid for their time, but they're actually very engaged and passionate about what they're doing, because these are their clinic lab hours. This is what they're building their whole life and profession out of. So they really do care, and you're getting a quality service, but for way less than what you would be paying at like a professional institution. And the other thing that I have noticed is that I've actually gotten some of the best healthcare at settings that were very similar, where they were either like freer sliding scale payment structures. And I think that when you're dealing with students, not only do they actually have some of the newest kind of techniques and information, but they also are just not as jaded. They're not as like ready to label you with something that they've seen a million times, because they're just so used to that setting. And so there's that too. You're kind of getting like fresh faces that are open to new experiences and meeting you on your level and everything. So, and if you're new to the environment, they're new to the environment, kind of. I feel like it puts you on a similar sort of playing field. You know, if you've been to counseling on and off in the past, it still is probably a great option for you if like, you're worried about being able to afford it, but I don't know what it's like normally, so I can't compare it to anything. But so yesterday I listened to a podcast from Dr. Rhonda Patrick on the Found My Fitness podcast. I will have a link below. She was interviewing Dr. Charles Radison, and he is a professional who has done a lot of clinical research on depression and the different like psychopharmacological expressions of depression and how and why it expresses. And he likes to tie it back into sort of like a deeper anthropological, like, okay, well, we evolved a certain way because of real things in the environment. We're products of the environment. And so one of the big links that he's looking at is why is depression, which we think of as this psychological disorder, associated so strongly with inflammation. And it's kind of like a chicken or the egg. Which is coming first? Is it people become inflamed and then they become depressed, or are people becoming depressed and that's causing inflammation? And you'll have to listen to the podcast yourself, or you don't have to, but that's kind of why I'm doing this. But I think that his conclusion is kind of like, it depends. So one of the things that I thought was very interesting is that one of the things that we can kind of all do for ourselves, because this is available most places, and I wanted to tie this back into the seasonal affective disorder and how I feel like it's relevant for the summertime and the spring affected folks, and that is that the core body temperature of someone who is depressed is elevated. It's like we're sick. It's like we're physically sick. So not only do we have this, like mental issues happening, a lot of the symptoms of depression come up in very physical ways. Like we're tired, we're lethargic. And if you think about it, most of the symptoms of depression go hand in hand with symptoms of a traditional, like, infectious illness. And he explains this by kind of saying that in high stress situations, it's more likely throughout the course of human history that we might become wounded. So let's say during like a prolonged war with a neighbor nation or tribe or something, or long periods of famine or whatever kinds of obstacles that we would have faced going back in time as humans, these are all situations where the physical manifestation of these symptoms might actually help protect us. And he gives a lot of examples how in countries and in areas where they have, one specific example is in Ghana, how they have people in Ghana right now who have clean wells and clean water and food sources and things, and then they still have people in Ghana who are drinking out of polluted rivers. And so what you see is that in the areas where the hygiene is higher, that people that have these pro-inflammatory genes die younger than people who don't have the pro-inflammatory genes. But in the areas where people die of high rates of infectious illness, the people with those pro-inflammatory, pro-depression genes actually outlive the people that don't have those genes, because it predisposes them to be more reactive, in a more reactive state to infectious illness. So does this all make sense now? So we basically brought it all around, and so what do we do about it? In a modern context, in a Western context, I would say that the number one thing that we can do for ourselves is exposure to heat. So I might have talked to you before, I'm actually kind of in a sauna right now because it's loud on the street, and so I had to roll up the windows on my car, and I was like, well, I needed a sauna anyway. So if you see me like wiping, I'm actually really sweaty right now. But he talks about one of these studies that Dr. Radison does is he had people sit in a, what is it called? An infrared light box. And he calls it total body hyperthermia. So they're raising the internal temperature as if you had a fever, your internal temperature to 101 degrees. And so this is this idea that you are, you're hyperthermic. So you're not full on like heat exhaustion or, you know, like stroking out hyperthermic, but it's like you have a real fever. And what they would do is they'd expose people to this, they'd bring them up to that temperature, and then they would turn off the lights and they'd leave them in the box so that they'd stay hot for a good amount of time. And 6 and 8 weeks, and I don't know if they went any later than that as far as checking in, but they found that people had a long-term positive antidepressant response to these heat treatments. And when they looked at the chemistry of what was happening in the body, essentially you're becoming sensitized to this heat mechanism, and so your body becomes better at cooling itself. And so one session in the sauna, getting your body core temperature up to this level and leaving it there for, I think I would say that they were doing this whole experiment for the ballpark of an hour, which is kind of a long time, because I know when I go to the gym and I sit in the sauna, I don't think I've ever really sat in the sauna for more than 20 minutes, certainly not at a time. I've gone in and out, or switched between like the steam sauna and the dry sauna, things like that. But I can say from personal experience that I feel amazing when I tough it out for longer than, sometimes I'm in a rush and I'll leave after like 5 minutes and I always regret it. I get home and I'm like, gosh, man, I know I would just feel so much better if I had just been for that 10, 20 minute range. So these are things that are available. YMCA, there's all kinds of free places. My gym membership is up. I made a video a while back about how I won't be renewing my gym membership. That's all paid, and so I have my membership until the 25th of this month. And then I found out that if I just pay, I think it's $5 per drop-in, which is where they get you. It's funny. I was doing the math, and it's like, without the discounts that I had when I signed up, my package would be like $40 a month, or I could just pay $5 every time I showed up. And so I'd have to go 9 times to pay $45. So, and I don't go that often. So that's probably what I'll be doing, because that's a little closer to my house than a YMCA. But my point is, even just taking like a really hot shower, I don't know if you have the water heater capacity to do it for as long as it might, you know, be beneficial. Sit in a hot car as long as you know you can get out. Because, yeah, having these prolonged states of high temperature really seem to have like a lasting effect. Hot yoga was another one that he was saying, has this deep penetrating heat effect to the body, because you're moving that blood, the blood from the surface where it's hot to the interior as you're doing the yoga poses and everything. So hot yoga is another very good one. And that was kind of what I was thinking about, this seasonal depression that people get in the summertime. I wonder how much that might have to do with this increase of temperature, because they talk about interferon is a hormone, it's a chemical that they can inject into people, and it causes tremendous inflammation. And so they can inject people with interferon and almost immediately get these severe depressive effects. And so I'm kind of wondering, like, they did the same thing to, and part of the depressive effects are these elevated body temperatures. So I'm kind of wondering, is it the transition from the cold season to the hot season and our body is having a hard time regulating temperature? Because if we are constantly in this like mildly temperature controlled environment, and then we go outside, or we have a prolonged period of time where we're stuck in a hotter environment, I'm kind of thinking that there might be an association there. So if you're someone who has or does suffer from seasonal affective disorder that is of the spring and summer variety, if you could let me know your personal experience of any kind, that would be great. And then also just let me know if you've ever tried heat exposure or heat therapy, or if it's something that you'd be open and willing to try. So I'm going to try and wrap this up because I didn't want it to go too much longer than 15 minutes, but I wanted to get to something else that's very close to my heart. I think that this is very important, and I'm so glad because this has all kind of happened since I started becoming exposed to the profundity of the psychedelic experience, probably in 2012, 2011, 2012, and it's happening, guys. The scientific revolution, the scientific community is really coming around to understand that these mystical and spiritual experiences, and Dr. Radison near the end of that interview with Rhonda Patrick really gets into a lot of these things. Traditional cultures have heat exposure. They have running, like meditative form of running. Which interestingly, there was something he said in there that I was just kind of blown away by, and that is that on a hot day, there is no animal on the face of the earth that could outrun a human over 100 miles. And I was like, whoa, not that I could run 100 miles, but that's, because you always kind of hear about how humans suck at nature stuff. And it's, for one thing, obviously we have managed to come quite, like, I'm sitting here in a little car box that drives me around at 60 miles an hour and stuff, and, we have these box houses we all built out of the ground, so we're doing pretty good at stuff. But one of the evolutionary theories of how we got these big brains, because when they look through the fossil record, they see that the human foot came before the anatomically modern human brain. And so we had these feet, and we have just been incredible long distance runners, and we can sweat. We don't have all fur, and we sweat out our skin. And that's weird in the world of animals. There's not a lot of animals that do what we do. And I know I'm getting away from depression kind of, but what's very interesting actually is that running, exercise, depression, heat exposure, all of these things, they do tie into each other. And so humans are really, truly amazing long-distance runners. And I have heard a lot of, negative stuff about, well, you're going to lower your lean muscle mass and things like that, and how there's, higher rates of cardiac arrest in marathon runners. And I think that there's something to be said about everything in moderation. And, if you want to be that guy that's super duper ripped at the gym, then you probably don't want to be a marathon runner, because the kind of muscle that you build is not the giant bulky muscle that you see the gym guys trying to go for necessarily. That being said, which one's better for longevity? I don't know. I think it's a trade-off for performance versus longevity sometimes. So you got to make decisions. But in any case, the way that I wanted to tie that all in was that Micheal Pollan is going to be here in Portland. He is going to be here on May 18th, and he will be talking about his new book, How to Change Your Mind, which is all about his own experiences while writing the book, as well as just a journalistic expedition into what is going on with psychedelics. What are they? Why do they matter? What's the science that's happening? What's the underground thing that's happening? And I think that this is kind of one of the books that's going to kick off the renaissance of psychedelics as a truly scientific route, but also to be really honored as what they are, which is a spiritual tool. So I'm very excited because I get to be there May 18th, and I will tell you all about it. And I'll just leave that for now. I am going to put links to Micheal Pollan's interview with Tim Ferriss. Also, Tim Ferriss's project, he's working with some people in Israel who are producing a movie called Trip of Compassion, which is all about MDMA and its effects on people with PTSD. So I am very passionate and excited about these things, and so I am very happy to be sharing them all with you. Sorry that this video is so long, and we'll just, you know, do what we can in the future. But your first videos are your worst videos, and I'm just trying to reach as many people as I can right now. But in the meantime, you get out there and be your best human. Thanks.